Hi, this is David Gornoski, host of A Neighbor's Choice and Things Hidden podcast, as well as some of our other programs like Science and You with our chief science advisor, Dr. Yu, and our seed oil survival series that we continue to have great fun unpacking the truth of nutrition. I wanted to give you a quick little message saying we appreciate all the support that we get from our uh, monthly contributors and our one-time donation supporters. And we'd encourage all of you to go to our website, a neighborschoice.com, click on contribute, and make a monthly pledge today, whether it's $1, $5, 15, 20, 50, whatever you want to do. Doesn't matter. Just be a part of building this new media project that we've developed to empower and inform, to inspire, to kickstart a scientific renaissance, an anthropological breakthrough and reformation in the church. All these things are possible with your support right now. So make that commitment today and help us keep doing the productions that we have. Thank you. Well, today we have a fascinating episode of A Neighbor's Choice. We're going to analyze what is the meaning of Javier Milei's victory as president of Argentina that just happened. A lot of folks are wondering, what does this mean for Argentina? I think there's a lot more questions that will remain unanswered for Argentina's destiny because of all the different troubles that they're undergoing. But I think there are some perhaps lessons or insights that one could learn for the conservative or right wing of America. There's something we can maybe glean from this. And I thought it would be great to bring on a friend of the program and a writer at the American Conservative, Curt Mills. How you doing, Curt?
Doing sublime. How are you?
Very good. So, I did a piece. I think it's out. I don't know if it's out today or whatever about this issue of what does it mean? And I think that one of the things that I've talked to you about in the past is what is the meaning of the Trump election in 2016? I think a lot of folks in the DC world, DC conservatism and so forth, read too much into Trump's victory when it came to some kind of a signal for like the middle class or working class of America repudiating limited government or something like that and wanting to adopt, some kind of full-throated, right-wing socialism, centralized planning and so forth. Some people read that into that because Trump didn't emphasize limited government rhetoric in his election. I was arguing, no, it's 99% of it is just charisma and, persuasion, just raw charismatic talent and relationship that Trump had with people going back decades because of his celebrity status. And then, of course, his charisma. That was really what was pushing him to the top. And some of the policies, of course, were wildly popular, but actually most of his policies that were the most popular were things that you could say are have a Venn diagram with limited government concepts like ending wars and draining the swamp. These are rhetorically not against principles of liberty and limited government. So I know you probably have some insights and thoughts on this. So I guess just using this election of this gentleman here in Argentina, I think it shows that when you have charisma and humor and you build a relationship with the public, that you can sell some radically different packages and still have success, whether it's anarcho-capitalism, like Javier is presenting for decades, or not decades, but I guess years on television, using full-throated endorsements of anarchists like Lysander Spooner. It's very bizarre. You think to yourself, I can't imagine there's a country where Lysander Spooner is being presented by a presidential candidate as like a serious point of debate. But here we are. So what do you learn? What have you learned or gleaned from this election?
Yeah, I think I agree with a fair number of that. I don't agree with your number on the 99% charisma on the Trump 16 thing. I do think the policies mattered. I mean, I think if Trump had just gone up there and sounded just like Jeb Bush, I don't think he would have picked off Jeb Bush. So I think the sort of bold contrast with the GOP establishment
Sure.
were pretty critical for for his success. I mean, Trump was super famous before he ran, and he got down the escalator on June 16th, 2015, and he was polling at 1-2%, and then by 4th of July he was head of the pack and has never really relinquished his control of the Republican Party since. 8 years later. I would say though, like, just, and then we'll talk about Milei, of course, but like I would also just say, somebody who I think got this right early was actually Congressman Matt Gaetz. I remember I did a profile of him in 19, and he called himself a libertarian nationalist. It was kind of, I'd never heard anyone call themselves that, but it actually, I think, was actually fundamentally pretty close to the package that Trump was selling, which is that I do think the rhetoric and the policy on trade, so some trade restrictions to support American industry, were popular and critical for him to win back the support that he got that made him president in the Midwest. I do think the immigration rhetoric and policies were very popular. And I do think the foreign policy, re-gearing it towards what is good for America, what's in American interest, that's the first order of the day. I think that was also pretty critical. But from there, under the hood, I mean, this is the president that cut taxes. This is the president that sort of viewed the stock market as scorecard. Within this sort of castle walls, so to speak, it was a pretty free marketeer presidency, and I think it was an interesting blend, and a blend that I think a lot of people look back fondly on, the 17 to 19 period, as evidenced by the polls. Obviously, Argentina is a much different country. It's the 23rd or 24th largest economy in the world, not the first. It's been mired in, just frankly comical levels of inflation for a very long time. It's been an economic warehouse of problems for 40 years. I mean, the inflation numbers in Argentina are greater than Syria and just shy of Zimbabwe's. I mean, so it's not good company. And yeah, I think Milei put together a charismatic package that opposed it, and I do think there are a lot of parallels there. But I think what potentially works for Argentina is not necessarily fully replicable in the United States and vice versa. But no, I mean, I think it's exhilarating stuff. I think it's very important. Milei, actually, in his credit, he wasn't a lifetime celebrity like Donald Trump was. I mean, he really was able to run this sort of insurgent digital campaign. He's younger. He's early 50s. I think all of that was very persuasive, and I think it's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I think that what it shows for me, and I guess I was being a little bit hyperbolic when I said 99% charisma, because you're right. That is part of the package of what made Trump's 2016 success, was that, he distinguished himself like any good marketer and any good person who wants to shake up the status quo. He very sharply distinguished himself from the old guard Republican Party in a way that was very very enticing and attractive for people who are disillusioned. But I guess and I think your point, makes some of that case too of this. I think that the new right made a mistake in, some of their intellectual circles of assuming that Trump's win equals repudiation of libertarianism or limited government. I don't think that really was something to take away from that election. And I think the fusionism of, having respect for borders, which a lot of, paleo libertarians have had for decades, and having, rethinking trade deals, a little bit more of a paleo conservative thing, but still has some buy-in with the folks who are considered to be limited government and libertarian minded. I think that fusionism is going to be the ticket going forward. And I think Milei, although of course Argentina is not something that is a one-to-one comparison, and certainly they have way more harsher economic realities that have pushed them to this point of accepting a guy who's quoting Spooner and so forth, and Rothbard or whatever, Hayek,
Mm-hmm.
that gives us a picture that is a roadmap to possible success in the future, is not trying to pit populism and nationalism in contention. And I think with libertarian ideas, but rather finding the through line that works for both, because I think that was a mistake. I think because George W. Bush and a lot of those folks, and even now, the Nikki Haley's and all that, they keep using those cookie cutter, lame, limited government talking points. And there's this kind of mistake sometimes of, well, we have to repudiate that and do something different. It's like, no, they're just phony, fake, you know, puppets. They're mouthing something that they don't really truly believe. They're not going to really do anything. Bush never cut a piece of spinning in his life, and Nikki Haley wouldn't either. These are people that just use this kind of canned Reagan talking points. But just because you have, kind of like fake people presenting, cynical rhetoric in direction of something doesn't mean that they actually represent that thing. I think Milei, on the other hand, really is a true believer. He sounds like someone who really, truly believes, at least he's made the case that he really believes in this stuff. And I think that's important, right? Because Trump truly believes. I think a lot of the rejection of the old guard republicanism has been more about, look, you guys say you're a limited government, but you're not, and so it's like, give me the real thing, or give me some mixture of that and whatever else, like nationalism. I don't want this phoniness anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think the losers on the Republican side in the Trump years were the neocons, not the libertarians.
Right.
I mean, that's who's left the party, or
Right.
had to just completely reinvent themselves and call themselves something different. I don't. I mean, I guess maybe Justin Amash a little bit, but you didn't really see en masse libertarian defections from the Republican Party like you did see from the neoconservative elite. I mean, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
I think you make an interesting point, David. That the authenticity matters. I mean, so like everybody thinks that they're the smartest guys around, but nobody would have ever counseled Donald Trump or Javier Milei if they wanted to be president, to proceed in this fashion, right? I mean, this is why I'm so adamant that Trump does believe in things, right? Like, if Trump had, he's a wealthy individual, he wanted to hire elite GOP consultants to work his campaign, and if they had workshopped all this stuff and he had done what he had said in 2015, I think he would have lost. And I think, to an extent, in 2020 he was a little bit overmanaged. I mean, I think that was part of his problem in 2020. And I think you're seeing 24 version of him is this unchanged version of the man. I mean, it's not fully correct, because he is actually quite disciplined. This time around, I mean, I think he's just saying what he believes. Basically, he has no authenticity problem. That's rockstar stuff. It's like these elections. This is something in it's a major country, and it's a major counterpoint. I think the sort of the leftward drift of Latin America, the sort of thing that you've seen in years in Chile. It was complicated because it's kind of a less populist government, but Brazil, Bolsonaro going down narrowly last year. This is a major shifting of the tide, and just another interesting tailwind for Trump in 24.
Yeah. Do you see Trump's positioning as just going to run I want revenge, and I want he doesn't really say much on policy this time as much. It's more about, they've wronged me and I need to get justice against the deep state and close that border again.
I think we've seen some. I think we've seen some policy in defense. I think, I mean, with the algorithms and the media, what we see, or the mainstream media, I should say, a lot of times it just gets clipped in this sort of sort of, I don't know, policy light fashion. But he has actually released a fair amount of policy, and I think they're. I mean, as has been reported by the sort of left liberal press and sort of uh, terrified fashion, they are prepared to staff up in a far more uh, authentic way than they were in 17. In terms of the revenge thing, I mean, I think when a mistake that analysts have with that is that, first of all, it's not obviously the whole pitch, and secondly, a lot of Americans feel like something went really, really wrong in this country in 2020. And so when Trump says, I will be your retribution, I'll be your revenge, that sounds pretty good to probably a pretty large amount of Americans who feel like this country went off the rails 42 months ago.
Are you talking about the election or the riots or the
I
COVID
think
thing or the whole thing?
I think the election thing is probably not as big of a deal as much as COVID, and and the mainstreaming of both BLM and trans stuff.
Yeah.
I think that stuff all came in tandem. I mean, it's just extremely anecdotal, but I mean, BLM for sure was essentially a fringe movement that became the default ideology of the country, and I really don't think that the trans stuff was nearly as big until 2020. It was a very sort of COVID dystopia digital thing that is
Why do you
now.
think they rolled out, or why did those things become so ascendant at the same time that COVID happened and all that and the election?
This is not my specialty, but I mean, my own view on it is, um, I don't know, maybe it was this stuff was always going on. People 10 years younger than me. I'm 33, and the Zoomers, I think, are quite different. The people born, after the millennials, and maybe this was all going on, and they started graduating college. Or I just think there's something about the digital first nature of everything. I mean, like the phone is now the default access to other human beings, right? Like that's what really shifted, and all of a sudden, like we just started, questioning whether the country should exist, whether the country was evil, whether men are women or women are men. This stuff was all sort of fringe stuff until those 90 days in 2020. I mean, really, just it happened at warp speed. Sorry, I need a better word than that, better term than that. But I remember being in California on Friday the 13th, 2020, and I think remember 2 days before, like I thought there was no way. I thought COVID was totally overrated. Turns out I was right. I underrated the human reaction to it.
Yeah.
And that's the scary thing. And so, and then I thought, maybe we're going to come out of it. We were do this sort of stupid 3-month lockdown. But I remember, walking around Washington D.C. in like late May, like May 20th, May 21st, seeing the statues and the Jefferson Memorial. I'm like, yeah, this is still a great country. And then, of course, 6 days later, they light the place on fire. And I mean, I obviously still believe it's a great country, but like we didn't come out of it. It was the tandem, the George Floyd thing and the COVID, and it's huge. And I think they're trying to bring it. There's interesting cleavages now. This Israel Palestine stuff I think is pretty big, but the difference is that Biden is basically being pincer motioned, and the Democrats can't unite on it like they could with COVID and BLM.
Yeah, this is the first time that the Democratic base has revolted against the kind of the mainstream media's perspective on a crisis, isn't it? I mean, they've been pretty rock solid. When COVID came out, the media said, well, I know they flip flopped, but when media said mask, they did mask. When they said vaccine, they did vaccine. They said lockdown, they did their lockdowns, and they and everything else. The George Floyd media said this is what happened, and they believed it. They didn't disagree. And then you get to this one. This is the first time where I've seen the younger base of the Democratic Party buck kind of the narrative of the mainstream corporate press on a topic of crisis.
Yeah, I mean, it would be hilarious if it wasn't, kind of sad and involves, the lives of fellow human beings. But, yeah, they're not able to keep the party line on this. And I mean, it is interesting. I mean, you and I are, I think, both pretty anti-war kind of guys. But to see Israel break the Democrats like this is just it's pretty. Biden basically is doing what the real politic for him is if he throws in with the super pro-Palestinian people, he'll lose a lot of establishment support. And if he throws in with the establishment, he's going to risk turnout. And but I think he has to go, especially if you think the guy believes in nothing, he has to go with his establishment. But I mean, this is we're still a year out, but I mean, this is the kind of stuff that could really cost them the election.
Yeah, I mean, all they need is another George Floyd thing or something like that to change the next flavor of the month topic. Though, unfortunately, it's pretty
Well, but I
bizarre.
mean, it's like, I mean, how, like it's kind of hard to do it. This is it's actually kind of the reverse of what was wrong with Trump's 2020 pitch, which was like, everyone's like, well, it's Nixon 68, and Trump's going to be the law and order candidate. I'm like, okay, the only problem with that is that he's president now,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
so, like, they try to do George Floyd stuff. Like, okay, so like, if some poor guy is, killed in police custody in a blue city in a blue state with a blue president, I mean, you can try to conjure some narrative of white supremacy going back to Jefferson and Jackson or wherever. But it's pretty flimsy without, the
Yeah.
figurehead of a Republican president to blame everything on as the great Satan.
Right. Yeah, but you were mentioning the COVID thing, and I think the COVID thing also lends itself to a more Milei approach to
Yeah.
politics in the sense of government should get the heck out of our way. But this is an example where Trump he kind of faltered on this a lot. I mean, he did a little bit of a lockdown. He really pushed his people into taking that product that didn't turn out to be so effective after all. And he hasn't had all he has to do. I keep saying all he has to do, because I know he doesn't want to ever make it. I did something wrong, but all he has to do is say, I put Mike Pence in charge of the, I put
Right.
Mike Pence in charge of the vaccine task force, and he failed me miserably. He turned out to be, and all he has to do is do a pivot like that, and his base will accept that as enough of a confession. But he's in danger, I think, on the like you were saying, when you mentioned that I'm going to be your justice for 2020, and you mentioned, well, the election's not quite on the top of that list of wanting to have something to some kind of justice for that. But the COVID stuff is,
Yeah.
and yet nobody it's interesting, nobody wants to talk about it. And politicians don't want to really talk about COVID much, because it's almost as if people had such a traumatic experience and
Yeah.
there were
Yeah.
so many mistakes. Everybody just wants to act like it didn't happen and move on. But it, like you said, there's a visceral feeling of
Yeah.
being wronged from that year. And I think if Trump doesn't learn how to be more forceful in repudiating that whole deal, including that magnificent drug, I think he's going to be in trouble with Kennedy taking away some of that vote that could have been going to him.
Yeah, we'll see what Kennedy does. I'm on the more skeptical side that he's going to stay in this forever, but
You don't think he's
we'll
going to run
see.
as an independent all the way to the general election?
I think it's possible. I think it's probably underrated that he could pull out or try to get on the ticket with somebody, or I just don't know where this is going with him.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about him.
Yeah.
Um, I think West and Stein are big problems for Biden, particularly West, if he can get on the ballot.
Yeah.
Because I mean that's just basically charismatic, cool black black Ralph Nader. Like that's just like Cornel West is fun to watch. Like
Yeah. He's a
he is
masterful communicator. That's for sure.
yeah, he is fun. And
Yeah.
like if you wanted an excuse to not vote for Biden and not vote for Trump, like you got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I think RFK is in a different situation.
He's polling in
And,
some cases at 19%. I know that's
I
not
know. I mean, it
trustworthy,
could
but
be. No, yeah, no. I mean, he's pretty famous. It's a famous name. I wasn't. I was 2 years old in 1992, so I don't have a sense of how famous Perot was before. I know he was pretty famous, like maybe
Yeah.
like Mark Cuban famous or something. Um, so Perot is the only one that has ever gotten numbers like that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
everyone talks about Nader, but like Nader
Yeah.
only, I think, like 3 or 4 in 2000.
Yeah.
Granted, it was enough to cost Gore the election, but um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, going back to the COVID thing, I mean, I think the COVID thing killed DeSantis. I mean, like nobody wants to talk about this COVID, and all DeSantis wants to do is talk about COVID. So yeah, that's not like the only thing going wrong with that campaign, obviously, but I think it was a
Do you
major
think that's do you
headwind.
think that's an effect of the same phenomenon I'm talking about? Like,
Yeah,
yeah, he
that's what
was
I'm
good
saying.
on it, but they don't want to talk about it because it's such a traumatic. Like, let's just forget about it because so many people died and
Yeah.
stuff.
Are you still in Florida?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. What's your sense of DeSantis's? Uh,
I don't think he's ever really had. I mean, a chance at the presidency with what he was doing. The way he did
yeah,
it was. I was. It's amazing, because you don't. What is so amazing is that we didn't really see his lack of. I mean, I could see it, but you didn't really see the lack of charisma he had when he did his governor functions and his press conferences. And I went to some of them, asked him questions at one of them and stuff, and
oh, really?
you didn't really see it, didn't come out that way. And I guess it's because it's a carefully kind of staged event and everything's nice and tidy. But once you get him out there doing, it's just it never came. It's so strange how it never really came up how stiff and socially awkward he was when he ran for governor.
Yeah.
But it came out in the presidential thing, and I think maybe it's just by contrast of watching Trump, signing pizza boxes and stuff. It just popped the contrast harder than it did against his Democratic opponents. Charlie
Yeah, I'm
Crist is
not
pretty
sure any
slick, but he's not very, I don't know, not very
yeah,
persuasive.
I- I'm not sure any president in the I don't know how we judge this, but I'm not sure any president, it's the 60th anniversary of the Kennedy assassination, but like I'm not sure any president since the Kennedy television era has been an interest. I mean, maybe you can argue Bush, he was president for 8 years. I mean, I do know I don't know the personality. Um, I mean, in general, the sort of classic definition of extrovert versus introvert is does the person gain energy? So that is I'm a lot of marketing, but to gain or lose talking, I feel like almost uh, uh, ever in their gain from talking to people. With DeSantis, it's very clear that it's work,
Yeah,
and that seems like a really big handicap.
yeah. Do you think that going
Well,
into
Javier Milei obviously gains it.
what's that?
The videos.
You're breaking up a little bit. Can you?
Oh, can you hear me? Just to rope it back to the topic at hand, the Argentine president-elect obviously enjoys talking to people. I mean,
Right.
that guy's got fireball energy. Yeah.
Yeah, and
You were saying?
he viscerally shakes with answers. He gets real excited, and
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
see him
Yeah.
shaking with anger and passion, like a
Passion.
charismatic preacher almost or something. So it,
Yeah.
it'll be fascinating
Yeah.
to see if he's able to make good on his promises of abolishing all those departments, and if it shows some measure of growth or success for Argentina. I think that will be a big boost for more of a anti-government turn when it comes to Republican politics in America. The question will be,
Mhm.
looking at, for example, going back to the Israel-Palestine thing, do you see Trump pivoting into a kind of moderate position on the matter? Because you see him right now saying, oh, the Palestinians have a lot of hate, and I guess the other side has a lot of hate too, and we'll see how this all plays out. And it sounds like clumsy first grasp at a kind of more moderate position in contrast to Biden looking, aligned with Israel. He doesn't want to alienate his base of, evangelicals who are more Christian Zionists. But if he's careful, like it looks like Trump's trying to thread the needle of if you saw what happened with the Muslim vote in Michigan, it's evaporated away from Biden and swung actually towards Trump for the first time in a in a long time. And Michigan is a key state that he needs to win. And it's interesting to think, actually some of the younger voters are polling more for Trump than Biden. And again, that might be related to their repudiation of Biden's policy on Israel. Do you see Trump, actually pulling off some kind of a triangulation where he's able to not tick off his evangelical fans that'll probably vote for him anyways, but at the same time pivot to get some of those disaffected voters?
Yeah, I actually do. I think he's actually very triangulates the Clintonian word, but perhaps it's just more organic than that. Yeah. Like he's a sort of a human Rorschach test. I think he's a Rorschach test on Israel, Palestine, and abortion. So I'll take the latter first. So like if you're very hardline pro-life, he's the guy who put 3 Supreme Court justices on the court that overturned Roe v. Wade. Reagan didn't do it. The Bushes didn't do it. Trump actually did it 4 years. So I think you're going to reward him. And if you're kind of a more pro-choice Republican, where like you think some of the abortion stuff, the restrictions being proposed go too far or something, well, you don't have any like particular worry that Trump himself is, that much of an abortion hardliner, right?
Right.
Because I think people think Donald Trump himself is kind of a secular kind of cat, right?
Yeah.
Whatever. I mean, it's not a passion issue for him,
right?
And same thing with Palestine. Like, he moved the capital to Jerusalem. He killed the Iranian general Soleimani with limited blowback, as it turns out, to the Americans. I think it's actually fair to say he's like the most pro-Israel president in American history. At the same time, he didn't preside over Hamas-Gaza war. And he says things constantly that are more radical than anything Biden would ever say about it. And so if you wanted to vote for him on the other end, he's given you ample reason for it.
Yeah.
So, versus Biden is in the opposite position. Not on abortion, but like on Israel-Palestine, if you're
kind of a hot potato,
Zionist,
it's kind of a hot potato on this. Whoever was in the White House when this happened was going to get stuck with it, on the buy-in has to happen.
Well, the Trump people would say that, this would happen under them, right? I mean, they're gonna. You can say it's an unfair argument, but you get to make it. Russia wouldn't have invaded Ukraine, and Israel would have been better prepared under Trump. This is an argument they're gonna make.
Yeah, and then maybe they would have learned more about Trump's border policies and not let the border be open for 6-7 hours it was when the attack happened from Hamas.
Yeah, astonishing intelligence failure apparently. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you're right about that. That he has this ability to kind of pace and kind of lead and set up so that you can kind of. I mean, he really does. He does seem to really, besides the personal statements that he's made and some of the, he has broken some of the taboos, but most of the time, he seems to signal that he wants to govern as a centrist, Trump, and he's more of a pragmatist about a lot of these things. And I think he can read the room. And he says, my God, and I think a lot of his moderation on Israel came from his deep personal slight he felt from Netanyahu. When Netanyahu refused to be neutral while he was still trying to contest the election, he felt like that was Netanyahu really throwing him under the bus and saying, look, I did all these things for you, and you couldn't even, wait a little bit and be a little bit respectful for what I did for you. And I think that really turned him against some of that Netanyahu faction over there.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously the animus runs deep between him and Bibi at the moment. I also do think that Trump has said stuff about Israel Palestine throughout his political career, which is just more outre and wild man or non-consensus um, for a Republican politician. I mean, he said he wanted to be an honest broker between Israel Palestine, and that was a minor furor in the 2016 campaign. He's also said he's done stuff that sort of the neoconservative wing would never do, like inviting the Taliban to Camp David, and I think he would meet with the Iranian supreme leader if he his national security team would let him.
Right.
I mean, he's said I think in public in the last few months, like I'd even be open to have a good relationship with Iran. Like we'll
Yeah.
just get another deal that doesn't have Obama's name on it.
Yeah.
And that obviously scares the bejesus out of the people who want to use America to do regime change
Yeah.
there. So, like, I mean, his instincts are that, and it's a cliche, but he really is like kind of a business guy.
Yeah.
And he's like, and he's a person. He likes to call people up on the phone, and like if he can have relationships with people and they're kind to him, and he reciprocates.
Yeah,
that's
in that way, he kind of sees wars and the threat of wars like lawsuits. Like, let's just hash it out in mediation. Let's not go to a lawsuit. That's a business man's approach to things. You can see it in the way he does things. Let's just try to work out something to deal that we don't have to sue you. So he throws around the threat of, I'll bomb the hell out of you, but that's more like, I'll sue the heck out of you if you can't come to the table with me and make a deal to work together. So in that regard, he would be definitely a step towards peace. I think one of the things he should say about the Israel-Palestine thing is the same thing he said with the Ukraine thing. I just want the killing to stop. Just saying statements like that can go a long way for people, in terms of like leading the pack, both Republicans and Democrats, towards something that sounds sane. Like he said that with the Ukraine thing, I think with Hannity or something. He said that I just want the killing to stop on both sides. I don't want Ukrainians killed anymore. I don't want Russians killed anymore. If he says the same thing for Israel, that clean and smooth, it's hard to argue with that, and it does make you look like the leader of the conversation. So.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see. We're doing this. We're taping this on the 22nd, so we'll see November. We'll see what happens with this deal.
Yeah.
Now we have a ceasefire. It has involved some controversy, but yeah, I don't know where we're going. It does seem like Israel is going to try to still destroy Hamas, although I mean, who knows? It's a black box.
Yeah.
So,
well, very good, Curt. I appreciate your time, and want folks to check out your articles at the American Conservative. And where can people follow you on social media?
You just follow my name on X or Twitter, CURT MILS at Curt Mills. Just Google me, see some of my stuff. Yeah, happy Thanksgiving, and thanks for listening.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.